Hi, and welcome to VIBEZ Daily. This is a daily devotional curated by VIBEZ Church to help you practice the way of Jesus and be all that God has called you to be. You have joined us for our year-long series titled Devoted. Acts 2:42 tells us that the followers of Jesus were devoted to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to breaking of bread, and to prayer. This podcast was created to provide context and commentary for what you read each day. Just before our friends begin discussing today's reading, we want to invite you not only for fellowship, but for prayer as well. We have created the VIBE Daily Chat Group to offer you fellowship and a community where you can state your observations, ask questions about the reading or the podcast. You can join us by downloading the VIBEZ Church app in your favorite app store. Click Join the Conversation and join us today. And finally, we hope that you can join us for prayer. Prayer happens Monday through Friday, and more information on that can be found on the VIBEZ Church app under prayer. Now, let's begin our conversation on today's reading.
All right, welcome back to the VIBEZ Daily Podcast. It is day 100. Whoop, 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 whoop. Pew, 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 pew. I don't know, use the DJ sounds of some sort. It's a party. It's a day 100. Confetti. You gotta find some confetti effects.
We need Dylan on the
soundboard.
Yeah, on the soundboard. We need that.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if I can throw some confetti on the screen or something. But it's day 100. As you've heard, I am back with my wife, Victoria, as we continue in the book of 1 Kings, picking up here at chapter 9 here today. But again, that's just worth celebrating. 100 days of our reading plan, 72-ish episodes or so by the time we get through today. So, man, we are making our way, and it's really cool and exciting to see. But 1 Kings chapter 9, we left off yesterday. Solomon built the temple that David wanted to build. It was magnificent, right? And it was awesome. And then he dedicates it, and he gives... kind of has a prayer where he asks the Lord for a bunch of stuff, but ultimately, God, would you hear us when we come to pray here, or when we pray in this direction, whether it's for forgiveness or blessing or provision? Lord, would you just hear us? Yeah. And chapter 9, we kind of have the Lord's response. So he responds to him, and it's favorable. But what jumps out to you in the Lord's response in 9?
Yeah, I just love it that there was no delay. Because I feel like there's anticipation of okay, is the Lord going to accept this? Is he pleased? But in verse 1, it just says, as soon as Solomon had finished building the house of the Lord, the king's house, and all that Solomon desired to build, the Lord appears to Solomon a second time. And he just said, I heard your prayer. How comforting is that? Because sometimes you be like, Lord, do you hear me? Mm-hmm. But he's like, I heard your prayer. That you made before me, and I've consecrated the house that you built, and I put my name there, and my eyes and heart will be there. And I'm just and that was the blessing, right? That may the favor be upon you, let Lord bless you and keep you, and make my face shine upon you. So for the Lord to say that his eyes and heart will be there, was just part of that blessing that the Lord gave back in, was that Deuteronomy?
Numbers.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know where nothing's located in the Bible. I know it be in the Bible.
Yeah, it was.
I don't know the location.
Moses said it. That's what you need to know in that general area. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that was beautiful. What were your thoughts?
I mean, yes, grateful that the Lord answered. I think, to your point, that is something that we all seek, right? It's that confirmation. I thought the Lord's answer was very interesting to me, because I feel like it speaks to God's consistency and his faithfulness. God does not change. He does not change. Honestly, Solomon didn't even really have to. I mean, he asked specifically if God would be present in the temple. But as far as everything else he asked for, God's I've already told you guys this. Yeah. I've told you, if you walk before me, if you follow my commands,
I'll be with you.
I ain't gonna leave you. I'm gonna be there. I will establish it. But
which comes in verse 6.
Right. But if you or your sons turn away from following me and do not keep my commands, my statutes I set before you, And if you go and serve other gods and bow and worship to them, I will cut off Israel from the land that I've given him. It's the same thing I've told you since Moses.
Yeah.
Moses been saying the same thing for generations.
Yeah.
Right? For generations, Moses, Joshua said it again, right? Like
Time and time again.
David, Samuel, like at this point, everybody keeps saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you follow the Lord, he'll be with you.
Yeah, and you'll be blessed.
If you decide to serve other gods, cut off. And like, yeah, it's so interesting that it's nothing groundbreaking, right? In his response.
Yeah.
It's just so consistent. God is so consistent. He is so consistent. He says the same thing every time. And I love that because it goes back to, we had a conversation a couple episodes ago, and I can't recall exactly if this was last week or the week before, but we talked really about like, and we've said this in a couple times, but just like hearing from God. And when people speak on behalf of God, or you hear the Lord speak, like it should be consistent. Like it should line up. Like this is what it says to me is God doesn't, his message doesn't really change.
Yeah.
His message doesn't change. Like, follow me, don't worship other gods, and I got you. I'll be with you. And if I'm with you, you'll be good. You'll prosper. You'll have all that you need. And I feel like, yeah, everybody, anything that should be said or behalf of the Lord should all align with that general principle. Follow the Lord wholeheartedly. You know what I'm saying? Don't leave him. And if you do that, you'll be blessed. You'll be fine. But if you turn from him and you decide to worship other gods and idols, whatever, don't be surprised.
Yeah.
When you get cut off.
Which goes back to my big highlight yesterday, right? It was just like my big thing takeaway that I didn't realize so much was, like I said, how consistent God is in saying this. No other gods, just me. No other gods, just me. And he said, it shows up in so many different stories. Isn't that almost who we're talking about here?
Yeah.
Like in what season they're in. The message has been clear. And even when we took like a David and we ended up last week when we were saying David's life didn't always look so blessed. He had a lot of trials. One thing we knew is God was with him. Like, and so I think even that's just the takeaway too. It's just like, okay, just because we go through hard things doesn't mean that God's not with us, right? Or that he's not fighting for us and we're not blessed. But like he is. Now Solomon's a different breed here, right? Like we're not all going to have the riches that Solomon has and all this rest on all sides. Yeah. That's Solomon's story.
Yeah.
That's not all of our story. And so even here, it just reminds me that like I still have to do my part in spite of what it looks like in the meantime, because the promise has always been the same though.
Yeah.
Like if I do my part, the guy's going to show up and do his, regardless of what it looks like. So I love that.
It's good.
More forced labor.
Yeah, all to say. So we have some couple other like short, quick stories here in 9. We kind of mentioned yesterday that King Hiram wasn't exactly excited with some of the land that Solomon gave him, right? And it seems like he kind of gets it right, gets right by him, and whatnot. But there's that, as you said, there's the forced labor piece, which we kind of talked about. And again, I think we'll come up here shortly as we deal with his sons, because there's kind of a conversation about how hard Solomon was on his people.
Yeah.
That comes up. But and then just kind of a real quick summary of that, like, man, these are some of the other things that he did. And you can kind of find out, here's some other just places that he or things he moved on, whatever the case may be. But like anything else in the end of 9 that you thought was particularly interesting, because it's kind of like, again, some random stories with Hiram, the forced labor, and then even like Pharaoh's daughter and some other stuff. But yeah, anything that jumped out to you here at the end of 9?
Yeah, I know we mentioned yesterday about like the forced labor of the Israelites, that it wasn't quite slavery, but here we see the slavery part, right? With verse 20, like those who are left over of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, and the Hivites and Jebusites, which were all people they were supposed to annihilate.
Correct. These are the people that they did not destroy.
But at some point, the Lord was just like, okay, because you have not done this, I'm not removing them. There's going to be a thorn in your side. Yeah. So at this point, they're slaves to do the work, and they were in their soldiers and stuff. I mean, the people of Israel were the soldiers and the officials and the commanders and stuff. But these other people still in the land are now the slaves, or like the real forced labor. And so I think it's really interesting, though, that like when we start reading now through the Kings, like how much they lose control of these people. Like they're slaves now, but as God has already said, like they're going to be a snare to you.
Yeah.
And so here they are living amongst them. And I just don't know if there's, and we can probably see later on, there's still not a whole lot of buy-in on these people's parts of the Lord being God for them.
Oh, of course not.
Or for the Israelites, for that matter. Right?
Of course not. Yeah.
And so definitely become the snare that the Lord talks about. But it's kind of like, oh, like they're slaves now, but yikes. What are you thinking?
So maybe a stretch too.
Okay.
So, you kind of had your stretch yesterday.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and get my stretch in this week.
Where are you taking this?
Well, I think it's interesting because you called out that like these people were kind of under the rule of Israel, but did not necessarily conform to Israel's God.
Yeah.
And I think it really just speaks to the idea that like you really can't force worship, like you can't force love, you can't force devotion to God, right? And I mean, it's God's own free will that he allows us, right? That even in the Israelites' case, that's why they always veered, because he always gave them the option, whether to worship him or not, and it was up to them to choose. But like, despite the fact that yes, they subdued them and enslaved them, as you said, they never embraced Yahweh as God, right? Or
the only God.
Yeah. And I think that's the reality. We don't get to. You cannot just force a nation to worship God. And if I could speak for a sec, just quickly, and then we run into that a little bit, even in this country, in America, that as Christians, we want to, as much as we can, right? We want to legislate Christianity. Like we want to make like loving God and devoting ourselves to God and being righteous in his way, like the legal way. And like, I get that to an extent, but just legislating sin and making sin illegal will not make people devoted to God. Like it will not make them choose God. And I think that's kind of what the Israelites ran into, is that he said Solomon could enslave them all they want. But we'll find shortly, like their influence has not left, on the people of Israel. And they never could force them to worship God and God alone. Despite that, they could work for them, they could make them do the work. They can't make them love God.
Sure can.
And it's probably something we can learn from that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so
that's good.
Chapter 10. Solomon is visited by the Queen of Sheba.
Come on, Queen.
Yeah, man, this is a pretty popular story because it's kind of transcends culture. This meeting of sorts is kind of beyond even just like biblical lore. Like there's kind of legend to this that's outside of what we know and read in our Bible. But the Queen of Sheba visits Solomon, and man, it's just nothing but impressed with who he is and his wisdom, what he has, and his land. What jumped out to you in chapter 10 with her visit to Solomon?
I just imagine, and it's like biblical, but I just imagine they did say she showed up with an impressive entourage, right? Like, I imagine she came with all this stuff, and it kind of seems like from what she's saying that like everything still surpassed her expectation. And so I feel like she probably even rolled up feeling like, like, I got riches. Like, who is this and saying like he got all that? Like, I might blow him away, Like,
everybody trying to say you got more than me. I don't know if I believe that.
They're
all talking about you. They're not talking about me.
Because I'm even looking at like later on like how much she brought to him.
That she ends up giving him, right?
That she gave him. She gave the king, verse 10, 120 talents of gold. What was? Give me the pounds, babe. CSB, please help us.
4.5 tons.
Yeah, tons, right? 4.5 tons of gold. Like, I mean, she came with a lot.
Yeah.
Just as a gift.
It's a lot of gold.
It's a lot of gold. And just to be like, boom, here you go as a gift. Like, to me, it was kind of like, it was real haughty in my eyes to be like, yeah, I'm bringing all this just to show you this is what I have to give
This
away.
is disposable. It's my disposable
My
income.
disposable, and so although it does not say that, I do feel like she probably came with like this, like, I'm gonna bring all this stuff to even just show you like how much I can just give away. But she ends up being blown away. Not what Solomon has, not just what he has, like he said, but like I love when she says like even what the attendants were wearing, the servants were wearing, like the servants' clothing and what they had, like all of it was beyond however what she could imagine. And so I do love that, like it is kind of like our God can go above and beyond.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what you thought this was, but when the Lord said he was gonna bless, like he blessed.
That's real.
That's
good. Yeah, I mean, I think that was crazy. Solomon, I mean, I do feel like she walked away like, all right, his reputation, I get it now. Like, yeah. I get why they were saying what they were saying, because legit, Solomon, for real, he for real, he the real thing. And yeah, like you said, it was just like they went through all the stuff that was gold and like cups and shields that were like solid gold and all of the stuff. And verse 23 says King Solomon surpassed all the kings of the world in riches and in wisdom. Yeah. And like I think what was interesting is, to your point, to me it goes back to what he prays for. I think it's in chapter 3, right, where like ultimately he prays for wisdom. Yeah. Right. He prays for the wisdom to govern the people. Yeah. And God's like, because you asked for that, I will also give you riches. And I feel like this just shows like it, when God, as you said, when God does it, it's next level. When he's like, all right, I'll make you rich and I'll make you richer than everybody else. Come on. He absolutely meant it. Yeah. Yeah. But unfortunately, it's about where it ends for Solomon and doing well. We get to chapter 11, and despite all the riches that the Lord gave him, despite all the wisdom that the Lord gave him, he makes a pretty foolish decision here. Yeah. And due to his love for exotic and foreign women, he kind of makes a grave mistake here in chapter 11. Yeah. Talk to me about what stuck out to you here.
Yeah. Like you said, David had this problem as well. Right? Like David had this, he just needed a lot of women, but I just feel like Solomon took it to the next level for.
Yeah, I mean, this is exponentially worse.
Like how you got 700 wives.
Correct.
And 300 concubines. Like there ain't no way. There ain't no way.
1,000 women is way too many women. I'm sorry. Like
I mean, we had a conversation with Rob, and y'all was like, one's enough.
Right.
This dude had 1,000 and 1,000. What? And so yeah, it was excessive to the max, and I think this is why the Lord has even warned them before. It says, do not take foreign wives for yourselves. Do not marry their sons, and do not give your daughters to their sons, and don't take, daughters from them. Like just don't. Just don't do this, because they will turn your hearts away from me. And at the core of everything, once again, we come back to God wants to be the only God. And the purpose was not because, I just don't like these people. The purpose was like, because, like you said, their hearts aren't for God, and they will turn you away from me. And even the Lord knows that, like, how easily that is possible when you are in that kind of deep relationship. Now, I don't know how deep his thousands were with him. Yeah. However, they did bring their influences.
Yeah, I mean, because there's a couple things there. Like, I think, one, like, that's exactly what it tells us in verse 3, right? That is exactly why he says don't intermarry. Like, it's not because I don't like other people. Because we just saw in his prayer before, like, we know he cares for and loves the Gentile and the foreigner, right? Yeah. So it's not because he doesn't love the foreigner. He just knows that the foreigners are bringing with them something the Israelites are not prepared to say no to. Yeah. Right?
The things that they were supposed to eradicate.
Right. And I think what's interesting is, though, I feel like the problem with even the number of wives he has is he as you said, he can't know them intimately. So there's zero way he is influencing these 1,000 women.
No.
Right? There's zero way he is ministering to them and bringing them to the Lord and helping them to, like, no. So instead, they're all doing their own thing, which is what it tells us, is that ultimately they were just out worshiping their own gods in their own ways, and he just wasn't stopping them.
Yeah.
And then eventually he started to participate in the same way, because there were way more of them than there was of him worshiping all these other gods.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing I just took away from this whole chapter, and, you know, we see this a little bit with David's life too, although there's obviously some contrition and repentance on his part. I think it's clear, scripture does show us that, like, just because you are for God today, like, doesn't mean you will always be for him, right? Like, there is always the possibility and the temptation to choose the world. And I think it tells us to be vigilant, right? To look for those traps of the enemies, those temptations of this world, the lust of the eyes, right? This is some of the stuff James talks about. John talks about later in scripture. Like, we should always be on alert.
Yeah.
Right? We should always be conscious of the fact that, like, yes, I may love the Lord today and be serving him and living for him today, but I am literally, like, one decision away from, you know, starting a pattern, a behavior, or a lifestyle that will take me wherever else, right? And I think, like, it's important to keep in mind that we are all, no matter how long you've been living for the Lord, running for Jesus a long time,
right?
You know, it don't matter. I'm a soldier. You can say what you want to, sister such, brother such and such. Like, at the end of the day, we are all subject to potentially fall short. And I think that's what Solomon showed me, is that he had a great life in a lot of ways by any man. If we stopped at chapter 10, Solomon would be the best king ever to live.
Yeah.
You know, but he got older.
Yeah.
And as he got older, he veered.
Yeah.
And it can happen to any of us.
And so we can't trust ourselves. We just really can't.
That's real.
Like, we just, like, every effort should be towards getting as close as possible to God every single day, because the enemy hasn't stopped.
Yeah.
Like you said, like, the enemy's not taking a break, you know. Like, oh yeah, they in the clear, they good, they follow the Lord with all their heart, there ain't no touching them. Like, no, he's always gonna be after it. And he said you can have all the wisdom in the world. He had all the wisdom from anyone before him or after him to come. Yeah. And yet he still fell. And fell at the hands of the temptation of other gods. Jeez. So how would how haughty would I be if little old me could think that, like, I couldn't fall short too?
Yeah, that's so good. Now we gotta move on. We gotta move on at some point. But I think it also, the last thing I just want to say that just jumps out to me is all of that wisdom means absolutely nothing, right? If we aren't using it for the right purpose, like for the Lord. Like he had, like you said, he had all the wisdom in the world, all the knowledge. Queen of Sheba came and asked him all these different questions, and there wasn't a question he couldn't answer. Yeah. He knew it all. Yeah. But he didn't use it to stay, like, righteous with God. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just like, dang, I can have all the book knowledge in the world. I can know this Bible back and forth. I could understand how to speak to the Lord. He actually could even speak to me, right? I know he's spoken to Solomon multiple times. I could even have those experiences, but at no point, despite all that I know, am I not, like, subject to, like, it means absolutely nothing. Like, if I don't use it to stay faithful to him, like, David says it, you know, hide God's word in my heart that I might not sin against him. That's why we need that knowledge. That's why we need that wisdom, so that we don't sin against him. Not so we are just smart and know everything. And combine that with a humble heart. Yeah. It didn't last long. I would say I was sad, and I just thinking this promise for this reign. I know the Lord kept somebody on the throne, but, like, the fact that, like, it fell short so quickly, right? Like, he just promised his daddy this, and like, it took one generation before he's already veered. Yeah, that's a little disappointing, you know. Gosh, yeah, it'd probably break my heart if I was David, if I, was alive to see it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so his consequence, we should probably talk about that. The consequence ultimately is that, yeah, God said he would rip the kingdom away from him. But due to his promise to David, because of David's faithfulness, he would not do it in Solomon's lifetime. He would allow Solomon to live out his reign for the sake of David. And then he would not completely take it away because he had already made a promise to David that he would keep someone there. So, this is a big picture thing. One of the things we talked about even earlier when we were in Genesis is like there is always going to be this dichotomy and this tension between the justice of God and like the mercy of God, right? Or in this case, even just like his own promise and his own word that like I have to keep my word because I'm God, but I also there have to be consequences for your actions. And like, I got to find a way to do both. And like, we'll see that. But that's ultimately what happens is Judah and Benjamin are the two tribes that will ultimately stay with David's lineage. And then the other 10 tribes will be broken off, specifically with the rest of Israel. But, or what will be known as Israel. So yeah, he raises up some enemies, some from foreign lands. There's a couple from foreign lands that kind of go after him, but the two significant ones will be essentially not just his son, but Jeroboam, who will be raised up here in a second. That we'll talk about when we get to chapter 12. But just before we get that, he does die at the end of 11. Was there anything in particular that jumped out to you in the rest of 11 before we move to 12?
I just think it's interesting that the Lord sent prophets, to these people, and just told them also what would happen, you know. So, I know that was just like and he told them why, and even gave him like another charge. Like the fact that he told Jeroboam, like, okay, this is why I'm taking the kingdom away from David and his throne and giving it to you. But he's like, I'm also giving you the opportunity. Like in verse 38, if you listen to all that I command you and you'll walk in my ways and do what is right by keeping my statutes and commandments as David did, like I will be with you and I'll build you a sure house and build as I built for David. And I'll give Israel to you. And so like God's heart is like, I just want a king that will serve me wholeheartedly. So like he's even given Jeroboam this charge, which you don't see him giving anyone else, right? Like any of the foreigners that end up taking over the kingship, like we see him giving Jeroboam this opportunity here.
Yeah, which is so crazy because we'll come to find out Jeroboam does the complete opposite. Right? Like he gives him a chance, he gives him an opportunity, and he tells him the same thing he essentially told Solomon and David, right? And Saul. But man, he's the complete opposite, and we'll come to find that out here in a moment. But yeah, it is crazy that you said that, like he gives him that opportunity specifically to choose him, to choose the Lord, and to serve him explicitly. But Solomon does die at the end of 11. And so once he does, his son Rehoboam is essentially next in line to be king. So chapter 12 tells one of my favorite stories, actually. I referred to this last year when we were going through what does the Bible say. We did a series on like questions, things of that nature, or different topical things. I don't know if you recall, we had a conversation on decision making. And I love chapter 12 because of that, because Rehoboam takes an opportunity to make a decision. Ultimately, the people come to him and say, hey, we talked about the forced labor. Your dad was low-key hard on us. Like, ease up, lighten up a little bit, and we'll serve you. We promise. And Rehoboam's like, all right, give me 3 days to think about it. And he sends them away. And I just love this. I love taking the time to make a decision. I love that he solicits the advice of others, right? And he does that to kind of make a decision. But ultimately makes the wrong one. Like he had the right process. He just makes the wrong decision ultimately because he doesn't take the wisdom of those before him, but instead takes advice from his peers. But this leads to the division of the kingdom, it's because Rehoboam ultimately chooses to be harder on the people of Israel than even his father was. The people rebel against him and go like, we don't owe you nothing. But yeah, what jumped out to you? That's kind of a quick summary of 12, at least the first half or so. But what jumped out to you and Rehoboam's decision, but ultimately Jeroboam's rise to be king?
Yeah, I think it was interesting. It's like these elders have been underneath your father's wisdom, you know, for these many years. Like, there's something to say about that versus, which I think it seemed like Rehoboam was really just looking for a certain response. It just seemed like he was like, yeah, no, let me ask my friends. And half the time my friends are going to tell us what we want to hear sometimes.
Absolutely.
You know, so there wasn't much wisdom in that. And so he was like, yeah, no. And, you know, it's what we do. We probe. We know who to sift out to get what we want, right?
That we do.
We know, like, who to go to get the response we want.
That
so it's kind of like, no, we're not going to go to sister so-and-so. You know, we don't want to seem weak.
We know what they're going to tell us.
Yeah.
They're going to tell us the right thing that we don't want to do.
We don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I feel like he already knew what he wanted to do, per se.
This is where I feel old, though. Like, because, you know, not that old, but I feel old. Because there was definitely a time in my life where I think I was Rehoboam. Like, I didn't want to hear what nobody else had to say. Like, I thought I knew best. I had all the wisdom. I had all the experience. And me and my friends, we kind of just knew. And now I feel like I just see some people younger than me kind of making some of those similar decisions. And now I feel like the old person who's like, there's wisdom in this, man.
Yeah.
It's like, I've been there. I'm trying to tell you, I've been there. And I think like it's gotten me to the place where I ought to also honor, you know, my elders in so many other ways. And yeah, it's just, you know, there's that old phrase, youth is wasted on the young. Like, because it's like, yeah, man, I made some terrible decisions when young because I just wasn't willing to just heed the advice of elders. Yeah, you know, and just wish that Rehoboam had done that. Yeah. But yeah, that ultimately sets in motion Jeroboam's rise, because verse 20 tells us when all Israel heard that Jeroboam had come back, they summoned him to the assembly and made him king over all Israel, because they were not happy with Rehoboam's response. And so essentially they divided again Judah and Benjamin versus the other tribes of Israel. And so that became that kingdom divided, and ultimately will become two kingdoms that we will trek through and follow through the rest of 1st and 2nd Kings. So Jeroboam, though, as we said, was warned and given an opportunity to serve the Lord, but he chooses instead, man, to just worship all these other gods, to build these other idols, man. What jumped out to you in the second half of 12, starting kind of really at verse 25 or so, as Jeroboam picks the wrong path.
Yeah, like not only just serve other idols, but like made all the people serve other idols. Like that was big for me. I don't know if it was big for you, where it's like it's mostly out of fear too. I'm scared that the people are going to return to give their sacrifices to the Lord here in Judah.
Right. They go back to the temple. They're going to fall in love.
Yeah, they're going to miss their family. They're going to have some reunions.
Like, it's actually a pretty nice city.
They're going to see all the gold again. They remember, we was living. And he was like, I can't have that, because then they're going to come back and kill me. So once again, it's self-preservation. This has nothing to do with the Lord or anything, right? Yeah. And self-preservation, this fear, and it makes these calves. Like, here we go with these calves again. Come on, y'all. Makes these calves and says, behold, here are your gods. And I think the craziest thing is like he appoints priests from among the people who are not Levites, right, to be the priests of this high temple. But I think the crazy thing is like the people just go along with this, and it's like how you know their hearts was not for God still. Like, even they might have been living under Solomon's reign and David's reign, but like their hearts were not for him. Not all of their hearts were for them. And so I think that was crazy to me that they even like went along with this. And was like, oh yeah, here are our gods.
Yeah, leadership matters, man.
Sure does.
I won't go too much into that, but like that's what's clear. But you're right. It's just it was interesting too. I think you just see the heart posture, because I just wonder how the story may have been different if Jeroboam still kind of had a similar thought process that, hey, we are now divided. There isn't a place to worship the Lord in our side of the country.
Mm-hmm.
That if he had the heart posture of, God, we just want you to be with us.
Right.
Too. Right? Like, God, can I also build a temple for you to dwell and reside? Right?
Yeah.
That like, that would have been a whole different, maybe heart posture. And again, I don't know that the Lord would have given permission, but at least like it would have been a different like approach that maybe God would have gave clarity on and kind of told them what to do. But he said it wasn't about that. It wasn't about like, we want God with us too in ours, but it's like I just don't want to lose the kingdom. And I'll lose the kingdom if they go back and choose to want to be there. But
after the Lord gave you the kingdom and told you he'd be with you.
Yeah.
And then you was just like stiff armed to the Lord, like, I'll take the kingdom, but not you.
Yeah. And so, I mean, 13, which is where we're in today, like judgment comes upon him, right? And so a man of God comes and tells him essentially, well, that was your chance. You made a mistake. So I will be ripping the entire kingdom, not just from you, but I will be killing all of the men in your family. And everybody that serves you, including your servants. And yeah, what do you think was interesting about chapter 13, kind of this first half, is that God kind of gives the judgment on Jeroboam?
Yeah. It's really sad because here God comes, convicts him, strikes his hand, like he extends his hand withers, prays for it to be restored. The altar he makes gets torn down and split in two. But yet all this happens, right? And in verse 33, it says, and after this thing, Jeroboam did not turn from his evil way, right? Like, he still continues on this path. Like, I feel like if God showed up, torn my altar in two, withered my hand, restored it again because I prayed for forgiveness or for it to be restored, like that.
Yeah,
like,
you didn't pray for forgiveness. He just asked for it to be restored.
to be restored. Yeah. Let me bring that one back because it wasn't about that. And still, just been like, no, I'm still doing all my evil. Like, how hard and cold must your heart be, right?
Yeah. And we're going to get to a difference. There's one later, there's a king later that does show repentance. Yeah. And God actually like extends his life essentially as a result of it. And you're right that like you would think that he would have come out of this scene and said, oh man, I made a mistake.
Yep.
You know, but no, he stayed exactly who he was. And then I think it's interesting, he tries to bring that man of God kind of back to his house. Right? That's where he is. And the man of God's like, no, God told me not even to come the way I came, but to go a whole different way, right? To like leave. And then unfortunately, God gets tricked by another prophet, like this whole prophet, to kind of get him back.
It seems so messed up to me.
It's pretty cold. Like, I didn't understand the motivation here. But yeah, talk to me about this old man that brings that man of God. We don't have names in this case, but brings that man of God back to Jeroboam's kingdom.
I don't know. To me, it just seemed like, why would you do that? You didn't get no word from the Lord to bring him back to your house. And then I didn't understand also why the Lord didn't show mercy on this prophet, right? Like, he was like, and you're dead. And I was like, I would have thought that the Lord would also strike down this old man that tricked him. But probably, I don't know, maybe the Lord sent him to test him or something. But
yeah, because it was clear, like, God said, I gave you clear instructions and I want you to follow them, right? And you don't have to question what I told you just because another prophet, like, you didn't hear it from me. You know what I'm saying? We got a direct line. But I do think, to your point, it's a little cold. Like, I can see how I would imagine that another man of God or prophet may have heard something, you know? And so, yeah, it's really cold. And again, I didn't understand the purpose, because ultimately the old prophet kind of feels remorse in some way, right? He brings his body back and buries him and then says he ultimately wants to be buried with him when he dies, right? Too. So like, I didn't exactly get his purpose, but as you said, it just may have been a test from the Lord that ultimately teaches us, you know, to discern the voice of God,
Yeah.
right? And know what he's telling us to do, and know that he doesn't go back on his instructions and his word, because that was the thing that was clear, is he knew the instructions, because he
did.
clarified. He said, I know I'm not supposed to go back.
Yeah.
I know I'm supposed to go a whole different way.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just convinced to change his mind. So I don't know. I said, this biggest takeaway probably is, man, like, the God doesn't change his mind. So when we hear God say something clearly, or we know, do that. You know,
Do it.
despite who else may come and try to question or change your mind or challenge you, even if they are a prophet, pastor, a church leader. If God was clear on what to do it. But yeah, it was kind of a messed up story. I felt bad for the prophet, because I can see myself making that same mistake.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Oh, another word from the Lord came from you. Okay. Messed up.
Yeah, I mean, an angel came to him in his case, right? What the old man said, but okay. All right, well, that brings us to the end of today's episode. We will talk a little bit more about Jeroboam and exactly how that comes to fruition, what was told to him about his house being destroyed ultimately, and his descendants all dying. We'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow, but we're going to be rolling through some kings pretty quickly here, kind of over the next few chapters. So get used to talking about some names and jumping back and forth between Israel and Judah and all sorts of stuff, as it's going to kind of be a little fast paced over some years, over these next few chapters. But appreciate you guys joining us today on day 100 of this podcast. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow as we continue through the Bible. Until then, take care.
Thank you for joining us for the VIBEZ Daily podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, or download our favorite, the VIBEZ Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the Bible. Take good care.